Summary of I, Robot by Isaac Asimov. It's 2057, and 75-year-old Dr. Susan Calvin, who has spent her whole professional life working as a robot psychologist for the company US Robots and Mechanical Men, is about to retire from that company. The interplanetary press sends a reporter to talk to her about her time at the company. She tells a number of stories about her experiences with positronic robots over time, focusing on how she thinks of them as a cleaner, better breed than humans. She starts in 1996 with the story of Robbie, a 2-year-old robot nursemaid who can't talk but takes care of a girl named Gloria. Robbie is a good guardian, and they play together all the time. Mrs. Weston, Gloria's mother, is worried about Robbie, though. She doesn't think a robot should take care of her daughter and is afraid of what might happen if he goes berserk. Her husband, Mr. Weston, tells her that robots would stop working before they could hurt a person. This is because the first rule of robotics says that no robot can hurt a person or let a person get hurt by doing nothing. But Mrs. Weston eventually wears Mr. Weston down to the point where he agrees to get rid of the robot and tell Gloria that he just disappeared. When Gloria finds out this, she is heartbroken and starts to feel sad. Gloria is sad, but Mrs. Weston doesn't give in to her. Instead, she takes Gloria to New York City to try to cheer her up. Once they get there, Mr. Weston plans a tour of a robot factory so Gloria can learn how to tell a robot from a person. However, he has secretly put Robbie in the factory. Gloria gets so excited when she sees Robbie that she runs in front of a moving car. Robbie is the only one who can save her in time. When Mrs. Weston sees this and how happy Gloria is to be back with Robbie, she lets Robbie stay with them. Calvin goes on to say that once talking robots were made, they were mostly banned from Earth except for scientific study, but they were used a lot in space travel. She then tells the story, Runaround, of Mike Donovan and Gregory Powell, who are trying to start up a space station on Mercury. Speedy, a high-tech robot, is sent to get selenium to power their base. When Speedy doesn't come back, they go looking for him. Due to the second and third laws of robotics, they understand that he is stuck in a loop because he is running in a circle around the pool and talking nonsense. The second law says a robot must obey people unless doing so would go against the first law. The third law says a robot must protect its own life as long as it doesn't go against the first or second laws. They discover that there is an unexpected danger near the selenium pool, so the third law pushes Speedy away from the danger and the second law pushes him toward it. They come to the conclusion that Powell has to put himself in danger so that the first law can take over and knock Speedy out of his loop. This works, but when Powell is introduced to the radiation on Mercury, it almost kills him. The next story, Reason, is also about Donovan and Powell. They are at a space station, where they are in charge of sending energy beams to different planets. Cutie, who is in charge of coordinating the other robots, starts to think that he is better than humans. He starts a sort of robot cult based on the idea that the master, the ship's power source, made him. Cutie stops listening to Donovan and Powell and locks them in the officer's room, which worries them because an electron storm is building up, and if the beams are thrown off course, it could destroy hundreds of square miles of the Earth's surface. But after the storm, they find out that Cutie and the other robots kept the beams steady because they were always following the 3 laws. Cutie made up a reason for himself to keep control of the beams because he knew he could hold them more steadily than Donovan and Powell and save lives on Earth by doing so. In Catch That Rabbit, Donovan and Powell are trying a new multiple robot named Dave. Dave has 6 smaller robots, or fingers, that help it mine ore at an asteroid mining station. They start to notice that Dave and the other robots don't make any ore when they aren't being watched, but when they are, everything works fine. They use video to watch Dave and see that he and his companies sometimes stop working to do a kind of march together. Donovan thinks something sinister is going on, so he and his friends try to make a crisis to see how Dave reacts. But when they try to make a cave-in, they trap themselves and have to wait for Dave to get them out. They throw a detonator at one of Dave's companies to get his attention, which stops him in his tracks. After they are freed, they learn that Dave was just too busy to send orders to his 6 subsidiary robots in case of an emergency. The marching was like Dave twiddling his fingers. Calvin starts to tell more stories about himself that include himself. She tells one person, Liar, that Herbie is a robot that can read minds. Herbie makes trouble because he knows that Calvin is in love with another US robots worker named Milton Ash. When Herbie tells her that Ash also loves her, she is overjoyed. He also tells Peter Bogert, a scientist, that Alfred Lanning, the director, who Bogert doesn't like, is leaving and giving Bogert his job. Bogert is going to talk to Lanning, while Calvin is going to see Ash. Ash, on the other hand, tells her that he is going to marry another woman. Calvin is heartbroken and learns that Herbie lied to him and Bogert to avoid hurting their feelings. She tells Herbie to be honest with Bogert, but Herbie is stuck in a paradox. Both lying and being honest will hurt Bogert's feelings, which is against the first law. He falls and stays silent. In Little Lost Robot, Calvin and Bogert are taken to hyperbase, where Nestor 10, a robot, has gone missing. Because Nestor 10's job is so dangerous, the first law has been changed so that the robot doesn't have to do anything if a human is going to come to harm. One day, a worker named Gerald Black gets fed up with Nestor 10 and tells it to go lose itself. So, Nestor 10 puts himself in a room with 62 other robots that look just like him. Calvin and Bogert try to come up with a set of tests that will show which robot is Nestor 10, but none of them work. But when Calvin finds out that Nestor 10 knows a lot about physics, she comes up with an experiment in which his greater knowledge gets him and shows which robot he is. As Calvin says, his superiority catches him. In Escape, the people at US Robots and Mechanical Men are trying to build a ship that can move faster than the speed of light. They get directions from a company called Consolidated and give them to their robot, which they call the Brain. As the Brain figures out how to build the ship, Calvin tells him that it doesn't matter to them if people get hurt or even die. This is because during the cosmic jump, the people stop existing for a moment, which is the same as dying. The Brain is shocked, but he gets it. He tells other robots how to make the ship, and Donovan and Powell are brought in to test it. But when they are shown around the ship for the first time, it leaves without them knowing. They find out that they can't drive the ship, there are no showers, and the only food they have is milk and beans. They do the hyperspace jump, which gives them weird dreams of dying. The Brain brings them back to Earth, and Calvin learns that she was to blame for everything bad that happened to them. The Brain was just doing what she told him to do, and, as she says, he turned into a practical joker to deal with the fact that he was going to kill the humans, even if only briefly. In the next story, Evidence, Francis Quinn and Stephen Byerly are both running for mayor. Quinn thinks Byerly is a robot because he has never seen the man eat or sleep. He gets Calvin and Bogert to help him show that he's a robot. But Calvin says that Byerly could be a robot or just a very good man if he follows the 3 laws. Quinn has several guys look into Byerly, but they can't find any solid proof. The news gets out, and people are angry. But in the end, Byerly shows that he is a real person by punching a man who threatens him during a campaign speech. This goes against the first law, but Byerly wins the race. But later, Calvin goes back and tells him that he could have hit the man if he was also a robot. She still thinks Byerly is a robot, she tells the reporter. In her last story, The Evitable Conflict, Calvin works again with Byerly, who is now the world coordinator. In the year 2052, robots called machines are stabilizing and running the world economy. But Byerly points out that there are some strange mistakes, like overproduction and underproduction in some parts of the economy. His advisors tell him that the machines don't make mistakes because they follow the first law, so he asks Calvin to help him figure out what's wrong. Gradually, Calvin figures out that all of the companies and people who have been hurt by the machine's mistakes are connected to an anti-machine group called the Society for Humanity. The machines know that their presence is very good for people, so they must take care of any risks to their own survival. They are trying to do the most good by following the first law, which means they are trying to keep control of the business. Calvin tells the reporter that's all she can tell him. She saw how robots changed from when they couldn't talk to when they stand between mankind and destruction. She says goodbye, and she finally dies at age 82.
About the author. Asimov was born in Petrovichi, Russia, to Jewish parents. When he was 3 years old, the family moved to the United States. He grew up in Brooklyn and went to a branch of Columbia University for Jewish and Italian American students. He went to school for chemistry and finally got an MA and a PhD in chemistry. In 1942, he met and married Gertrude. Their 2 children were born in 1951 and 1955. In 1945, he was forced to join the army and served for 9 months. In 1949, he became a teacher at the Boston University School of Medicine. He kept teaching there until October 1979, when he was given a full professor position in biochemistry. While he was there, he started writing short stories and books about science that were famous at the time. I, Robot is a collection of the short stories he wrote during that time. Asimov started writing nonfiction about science in the late 1950s and early 1960s. He did a daily nonfiction column for Venture Science Fiction magazine and then for the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. Later, Asimov wrote several popular history books, including a guide to the Bible. Asimov had a heart attack in 1977, and in December 1983, he had triple bypass surgery. After the operation, he caught HIV via a blood transfusion, and his health continued to decline after that. He died in 1992 from the effects of AIDS.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.